Princess Lirelei woke up to the sound of crystal bells ringing across the palace. It was the Festival of Three Moons, the most important celebration on planet Zephyria. She stretched her arms and watched as the beautiful patterns on her silver-blue skin started glowing brighter. These weren't tattoos or makeup. They were natural marks that showed she belonged to the royal family. The princess walked to her window and looked out at the amazing view. 3 moons hung in the purple sky like giant pearls, and the city below sparkled with thousands of crystal towers. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings like colorful birds, and she could see people celebrating in the streets. Everyone was happy and excited for the festival. Lirelei had been preparing for this day for months. Tomorrow, she would officially become the next ruler of the Zephyrian Empire. Her parents, the Emperor and Empress, had been teaching her everything about leading their people. She learned about the 7 star systems they controlled, the ancient crystal cores that powered their civilization, and the responsibility that came with the throne. What made Lirelei special wasn't just her royal blood. She had a rare gift called psychic resonance. This meant she could talk to the crystal cores using her mind. These huge crystals were like the heart of their entire civilization. They provided energy for everything: the flying cars, the glowing buildings, even the air they breathed. Only someone with her gift could properly communicate with them. The princess believed in something different from the old ways. While her ancestors had kept their people separate from other species in the galaxy, Lirelei wanted to reach out and make friends with other worlds. She had secretly been studying reports about a planet called Earth, where creatures called humans lived. They seemed interesting and peaceful, and she thought maybe they could learn from each other, but not everyone agreed with her ideas. Her cousin Vexstar, who was the commander of their military, thought these plans were dangerous. He believed that Zephyrians were better than all other species and should stay that way. He had been talking to other military leaders, convincing them that Lirelei's ideas would make their empire weak. As the princess got ready for the festival, she had no idea what was about to happen. She put on her most beautiful dress, made from fabric that changed colors like a rainbow. Her crown was made of the same crystal material as the power cores, and it helped make her psychic abilities stronger. She looked in the mirror and smiled, thinking about the wonderful future she would create for her people. The festival began with a grand parade through the capital city. Lirelei rode on a floating platform with her parents, waving to the crowds below. People cheered and threw glowing flowers that lit up the air like fireworks. Musicians played beautiful songs and dancers performed in the streets. The celebration was so joyful that everyone forgot about their worries. During the festival, it was tradition to lower the planet's defense systems as a sign of trust and peace. The powerful shields that protected Zephyria from space attacks were turned off for just 1 day each year. This showed that the royal family believed in the goodness of their people and wasn't afraid of any threats. But Vexstar had been planning for this moment. He had secretly gained control of key military positions and convinced many soldiers that Lirelei was a threat to their way of life. He told them that her ideas about making friends with other species would lead to invasion and conquest. He painted a scary picture of aliens coming to steal their technology and enslave their people. The attack came during the most beautiful part of the festival. As the 3 moons reached their highest point in the sky, creating a magical light, Vexstar's forces struck. Soldiers who had sworn to protect the royal family suddenly turned against them. The palace guards, caught completely off guard, tried to fight back but were overwhelmed. Lirelei watched in horror as chaos erupted around her. The peaceful celebration turned into a nightmare. Her parents tried to activate the emergency systems, but Vexstar had already taken control of the palace defenses. The same crystal technology that was meant to protect them was now being used against them. The Emperor and Empress were captured and taken to the throne room. There, in front of their daughter, they were subjected to something called crystallization, a punishment that turned living beings into crystal statues. They remained alive but frozen forever, unable to move or speak. It was considered the worst fate possible for a Zephyrian. Lirelei tried to use her psychic powers to fight back, but without her crown and other amplifiers, she was too weak. Vexstar had studied her abilities and knew exactly how to limit them. She was captured and brought before the new ruler, who declared himself Emperor of Zephyria. Instead of ending her life immediately, Vexstar had a crueler plan. He knew that making Lirelei a martyr would only inspire others to rebel against him. So he decided to make her disappear completely. He announced to the people that the princess had fled like a coward, abandoning her duties and her people in their time of need. The truth was much worse. Lirelei was given a powerful sleeping drug and loaded onto a secret transport ship. While she slept, she was taken far away from everything she had ever known. The destination was a planet called Verdania, a world that had been marked as forbidden and dangerous. It was covered in thick jungles, full of deadly creatures and poisonous plants. This planet was used as a place of exile for the worst criminals in the Empire. But even they were usually given some supplies and a chance to survive. Lirelei was given nothing. She was left unconscious in the middle of the jungle, wearing only her torn festival dress. Vexstar believed that the hostile environment would take care of her within days. As the transport ship left her behind, Lirelei lay motionless among the alien plants and strange sounds of the jungle. The girl who had once lived in crystal palaces and commanded the power of stars was now completely alone in a world that wanted to destroy her. She had no food, no water, no shelter, and no way to contact anyone for help. The last thing she remembered before waking up in this green nightmare was the sound of her people cheering during the festival. Now, instead of celebration, she would wake up to the sounds of predators hunting in the darkness. The princess, who had dreamed of building bridges between worlds, was about to fight for her life in a place where every shadow could hide death. But Lirelei didn't know that this terrible betrayal would eventually lead to something incredible. Sometimes the darkest moments in our lives are actually the beginning of our greatest adventures. The jungle that was meant to be her grave would instead become the place where she would discover who she really was underneath all the royal titles and fancy clothes. The girl who had lived her entire life being served by others would now have to learn to serve herself. The princess, who had never known hunger or fear, would soon understand both very well. And the future ruler, who had been taught that her bloodline made her special, would discover that real strength comes from something much deeper than family. History, as night fell over the jungle and strange creatures began to move through the trees, Princess Lirelei's real journey was about to begin. Princess Lirelei slowly opened her eyes to a world she had never seen before. Instead of the crystal ceiling of her palace bedroom, she saw a thick canopy of strange leaves blocking out most of the sunlight. The air felt heavy and wet, making it hard to breathe. Everything smelled different, like wet earth mixed with something sweet and dangerous. She tried to sit up, but her head spun wildly. The sleeping drug that Vexstar had given her was still making her feel sick and confused. As her vision cleared, she realized she was lying on soft, spongy ground covered with moss that glowed faintly in the dim light. This wasn't normal moss. It moved slightly when she touched it. It's almost like it was alive. The first thing that hit her was the sound. The jungle was never quiet. There were clicking noises, low growls, and strange whistling sounds coming from all directions. Sometimes she heard what sounded like singing, but it was too alien to be comforting. Every sound made her jump because she didn't know if it was coming from something that might hurt her. Lirelei looked down at herself and gasped. Her beautiful festival dress was torn and dirty. The fabric that had once changed colors like a rainbow was now dull and stained with mud. Her crown was gone, and without it, she felt like half of herself was missing. The crown hadn't just been pretty, it had helped her use her psychic powers. Without it, she could barely sense anything beyond her own fear. She tried to stand up, but her legs were shaky and weak. The ground felt strange under her feet, not solid like the crystal floors she was used to, but soft and uneven. With each step, her feet sank slightly into the moss, and she could feel small creatures moving underneath. She had to fight the urge to scream every time something touched her feet. The princess had no idea where she was or how to get home. All around her, enormous trees stretched up so high that she couldn't see their tops. Their trunks were wider than entire rooms in her palace. and their bark had patterns that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. Vines hung down like curtains, and some of them moved on their own, reaching toward her as she passed. Water was the first problem she had to solve. Her throat felt dry and scratchy, and she knew she wouldn't last long without something to drink. She could hear the sound of running water somewhere in the distance, but every time she tried to follow it, the sound seemed to move to a different direction. It was like the jungle was playing tricks on her. When she finally found a small stream, she was so thirsty that she almost drank from it immediately. But something made her stop. The water was a strange blue-green color, and it seemed to glow slightly. Small fish swam in it, but they had too many fins and eyes that looked almost intelligent. She realized that drinking this water might make her very sick or worse. Instead, she tried to find rainwater that had collected in the large leaves of the trees. Even this was risky because she didn't know if the plants themselves were poisonous. But she was so thirsty that she had to try. The water tasted bitter and strange, but it helped her feel a little stronger. Finding food was even harder. On Zephyria, Lirelei had never had to worry about meals. Food had always appeared when she was hungry, prepared by the palace cooks. Had no idea how to hunt or gather anything edible. The jungle was full of fruits and berries, but they came in colors and shapes she had never seen before. Some were bright purple with spikes, others were perfectly round and seemed to glow from the inside. She was afraid to eat anything because she didn't know what might be poisonous. But as the hours passed, hunger made her desperate. She finally tried a small orange fruit that smelled sweet. It tasted awful and made her stomach hurt, but it gave her a little energy. She learned quickly that she had to eat very small amounts of anything new and wait to see how her body reacted. The worst part wasn't the hunger or thirst, it was the constant fear. Everything in this jungle seemed designed to hurt her.
Out there
were plants with thorns as long as her fingers, flowers that snapped shut when she got too close, and vines that seemed to follow her movements. She had to be careful with every step because the ground was full of holes and hidden dangers. Creatures of the jungle were even more frightening. She saw eyes watching her from the shadows, some small and curious, others large and hungry. There were things that looked like birds but had scales instead of feathers. Animals that seemed part plant and part creature crawled along the tree branches. Everything was different from the gentle, domesticated animals she had known in the palace gardens. At night, the jungle became truly terrifying. The darkness was complete, broken only by the glow of various plants and animals. She could hear large creatures moving through the trees, their footsteps shaking the ground. Sometimes she heard roars that made her whole body tremble. She tried to hide in the hollow of a large tree, but even there she didn't feel safe. Sleep was almost impossible. Every time she started to drift off, a new sound would wake her up. Her mind kept going back to her comfortable bed in the palace, with its soft sheets and warm blankets. Now she was trying to sleep on the hard ground. Using large leaves as a blanket, now things crawled over her in the darkness. The princess had never felt so alone in her entire life. She had always been surrounded by people who cared about her, her parents, her teachers, the palace staff. Now there was nobody. She tried talking to herself just to hear a familiar voice, but even her own voice sounded strange in this alien place. Days blended together in a blur of fear and survival. She learned to avoid the bright red plants that burned her skin when she touched them. She discovered that some of the glowing moss was safe to eat, even though it tasted terrible. Figured out how to make a simple shelter using branches and leaves, though it barely protected her from the rain. The hardest part was losing hope. Each day, she felt a little weaker and a little more desperate. The confident princess who had once believed she could unite different worlds was now struggling just to stay alive. She began to wonder if this was how her story would end, alone and forgotten in a jungle on a planet no one cared about. But even in her darkest moments, something inside her refused to give up completely. Maybe it was her royal training, or maybe it was just the basic human will to survive. She kept moving forward, one day at a time. Learning a little more about this deadly world with each passing hour, the jungle was teaching her lessons that no palace tutor ever could. She was learning that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being stubborn, enough to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. And though she didn't know it yet, these hard lessons were preparing her for something amazing that was just around the corner. Dr. Alex Chen had been living in the jungle for 3 months, and he thought he had seen everything this dangerous planet could throw at him. He was a scientist from Earth who had come to study the strange plants and animals of Verdania. Small research camp was hidden deep in the jungle, where no one would find him doing his secret work. Alex wasn't supposed to be there. His research was funded by people who wanted to learn about alien life forms, but the government didn't know about it. He had been a doctor in the military before becoming a plant scientist, so he knew how to take care of himself in dangerous places. Still, this jungle tested him every single day. On the morning when everything changed, Alex was collecting samples near a stream about half a mile from his camp. He was wearing his usual protective gear, thick boots, long sleeves, and a breathing mask to filter out the poisonous spores that floated through the air. He had learned to move carefully and quietly, because loud sounds attracted predators. That's when he saw something that made him freeze in place. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The jungle spores sometimes made people see things that weren't really there. But as he got closer, he realized he was looking at a person, or at least something that looked like a person. She was collapsed by the edge of the stream, barely moving. Her skin was a pale blue color, and there were faint patterns on her arms that seemed to glow weakly in the dim jungle light. Her hair was long and silver, nothing like any human hair he had ever seen. She was clearly not from Earth, but she was also clearly dying. Alex's first instinct was to run. He had been taught that meeting alien life forms could be extremely dangerous. But as he watched her struggle to lift her head, something deeper kicked in. The same instinct that had made him become a doctor in the first place. He couldn't just watch another living being suffer and die. He approached slowly, making soft sounds to let her know he was there. When she looked up at him, he saw eyes that were larger than human eyes, with colors that shifted like opals. Was intelligence there, and something else? Desperate hope, mixed with fear? She tried to speak, but the sounds she made were nothing like any language he had ever heard. The alien girl was in terrible condition. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and he could see cuts and bruises all over her body. She was clearly starving, and dehydrated. Whatever had brought her to this jungle, she had been here for a while and was losing the fight to survive. Alex made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Despite every warning he had ever received about alien contact, he carefully picked her up and carried her back to his camp. She was lighter than he expected, and her skin felt warm but different, like it had a subtle electric energy running through it. His research station was small but well equipped. He had medical supplies, water purification equipment, and food, supplies that could last for months. More importantly, he had spent his military years learning how to treat injuries and illnesses in difficult conditions. He hoped that some of his knowledge would work on alien biology. The first challenge was communication. Alex tried speaking to her in English, then in the few other languages he knew, but she couldn't make the same sounds with her vocal cords. When she tried to speak, it came out as musical tones and clicks that were beautiful but impossible for him to understand. But Alex was patient and creative. He started with simple gestures, pointing to water when she looked thirsty, showing her food when she seemed hungry. He drew pictures in the dirt to try to explain things. Slowly, she began to understand that he was trying to help her, not hurt her. The girl he started thinking of her as Luna, because of her silver hair, was clearly very intelligent. She caught on quickly to his gesture system and even started creating her own signs to communicate with him. When he pointed to himself and said Alex, she touched her chest and made a series of musical sounds that he guessed was her name. Taking care of her was like solving a fascinating puzzle, he noticed. That she seemed to get stronger when she was near his artificial lights. So he guessed that her people might get energy from light the way plants do. He set up a special area where she could rest under his brightest lamps. And sure enough, the glowing patterns on her skin started to become brighter. Her diet was another challenge. She couldn't eat most of the food he had brought from Earth. but she seemed to do well with certain jungle plants that he had been studying. Together, they experimented with different combinations until they found things that gave her strength without making her sick. As days passed, Alex learned more about his unexpected guest. She was clearly from an advanced civilization. Her bone structure and the way she moved suggested someone who had grown up with technology far beyond anything humans had developed. The patterns on her skin weren't tattoos, but seemed to be natural, like a mood ring that showed her emotions and health. More importantly, he began to understand her personality. Despite everything she had been through, she had a gentle spirit. In a curious mind, she was fascinated by his scientific equipment and tried to help him with his research. She seemed to understand concepts quickly and had an intuitive grasp of how the jungle ecosystem worked. Alex found himself looking forward to their daily interactions. Teaching her English words became a game they both enjoyed. She would point to objects and try to make the sounds, while he attempted to learn some of her musical language. They laughed together when they made mistakes, and slowly, a real friendship began to form. But their peaceful routine was about to be interrupted. One evening, as Alex was updating his research notes, his communication device crackled to life. It was an emergency message from Earth. His illegal research project had been discovered, and security forces were being sent to bring him back. The message was clear. He had 48 hours to destroy all his research and prepare for extraction. Anyone found with him would be taken as evidence of alien contact. Alex looked at Luna, who was peacefully resting under his lights, and realized that she would be treated as a specimen, not a person. For the first time in his life, Alex faced a choice between his career and his conscience. He could return to Earth and continue his scientific work, or he could stay and protect the alien girl who had become his friend. The decision, when it came, surprised him with how easy it was. He smashed his communication equipment and began erasing all his research data. Luna watched him with concern, somehow understanding that something important was happening. When he was finished, he sat down beside her and tried to explain through gestures that they would have to leave this place and find somewhere new to hide. She looked at him with those shifting, opal eyes, and he saw something there that he had never seen before: complete trust. She understood that he was giving up everything to protect her, and in that moment, both of them realized that they had found something more valuable than scientific discovery or royal birthright. They had found friendship that crossed the boundaries between worlds, and it was worth protecting at any cost. The weeks that followed Alex's decision to destroy his communication equipment became the most meaningful time in both of their lives. With no way to contact the outside world and no pressure to return home, Alex and Lirale had the chance to really get to know each other. What started as a rescue mission slowly turned into something much deeper, a friendship that neither of them had expected. Every morning, Alex would wake up to find Lirale already sitting under his artificial lights, the patterns on her skin glowing brighter as she absorbed the energy. He had figured out that her people were similar to plants in some ways. They needed specific types of light to stay healthy. Using his scientific equipment, he created a daily light therapy routine that helped restore her natural glow and gave her strength. Watching her recover was like watching a flower bloom. When he first found her, she had been pale and weak, her bioluminescent patterns barely visible. Now, as she got healthier, the designs on her skin became more vibrant and complex. They seemed to change based on her emotions too, glowing soft blue when she was content, shifting to warm gold when she was excited, dimming to silver when she was sad or thoughtful. Their communication system grew more sophisticated each day. They had moved far beyond simple pointing and gesturing. Alex taught her to write letters in the dirt, and she taught him some of the musical tones that made up her language. They discovered that she could understand written English much faster than spoken words. So Alex started leaving her little notes explaining things around the camp. She wrote back using a combination of English letters and her own beautiful script. That looked like flowing water. Her handwriting was elegant and precise, reminding Alex that she came from a highly advanced civilization. Through these written conversations, they began to share their stories. Lirale told Alex about her life as a princess, about the crystal palaces and the floating cities of her homeworld. She drew pictures of her people and their technology, showing him vehicles that moved through space and buildings that grew like living things. But more importantly, she told him about her dreams of bringing different species together in peace. Alex shared his own story, how he had been a soldier before becoming a scientist, and how seeing too much violence had made him want to study life instead of taking it. He told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, about humans who were still learning how to live together peacefully. He explained that he had come to the jungle to learn, not to conquer. As they spent more time together, they both began to change in ways they hadn't expected. Lirelei learned that leadership wasn't about having power over others. It was about caring for them and making sacrifices for their well-being. Watching Alex give up his career and his chance to return home just to protect her taught her what real courage looked like. Alex discovered that intelligence and wisdom could come in forms he'd never imagined. Lirelei showed him how to read the jungle's moods, how to tell which plants were safe and which ones were dangerous, just by watching how they moved. Her psychic abilities, even weakened as they were, helped them avoid predators and find safe paths through the dangerous terrain. They became a perfect team. Alex's scientific knowledge combined with Lirelei's intuitive understanding of living systems made them incredibly effective at surviving in the jungle. More than that, they started to enjoy their life together. They would explore new areas during the day, always staying alert for danger but also marveling at the strange beauty of their alien environment. In the evenings, they would sit by their small campfire and share stories. Alex would tell her about human customs and holidays, about movies and music and books. Lirelei would describe the festivals of her people, the way they celebrated when new crystal cores came to life, and the ancient songs that told the history of their civilization. But their peaceful routine couldn't last forever. One night, as they were settling down to sleep, Lirelei suddenly sat up and put her hand to her forehead. Her skin patterns started flashing rapidly in colors Alex had never seen before, deep purple mixed with urgent red. "What's wrong?" Alex asked, immediately alert. Lirelei pointed to the sky and made urgent musical sounds. Even though Alex couldn't understand her language, he could hear the worry in her voice. She grabbed a stick and started drawing frantically. In the dirt, the picture showed spacecraft and armed figures. Alex felt his heart sink as he realized what she was trying to tell him. Ships were coming, probably the security forces that had been sent to find him. But there might be others too. People from her own world who had finally tracked her down. They spent the rest of the night preparing to leave their camp. Alex packed only the most essential supplies, while Lirelei used her weakened psychic abilities to sense how much time they had. Her powers were still limited without her royal crown and other amplifiers. But she could feel the approaching danger like a storm on the horizon. As dawn broke, they heard the first sounds of aircraft in the distance. Alex made a difficult decision. Instead of running deeper into the jungle where they might get lost or trapped, he decided they should head towards some caves he had discovered during his research. The caves were dangerous, filled with unknown creatures and toxic gases, but they would provide better hiding places than the open jungle. The journey to the caves was the most dangerous thing either of them had ever done. They had to cross territory controlled by some of the jungle's most aggressive predators. Alex's military training helped them move quietly and avoid detection, while Lirelei's growing connection to the living world around them warned them of hidden dangers. During one terrifying moment, they found themselves surrounded by a pack of creatures that looked like a cross between wolves and giant insects. Alex was ready to fight them off with the few weapons he had, but Lirelei stepped forward and began making soft musical sounds. To Alex's amazement, the creatures stopped their attack and seemed to listen to her. After a few tense minutes, they simply walked away, as if she had somehow convinced them that they meant no harm. "How did you do that?" Lex whispered when they were safe. Lirelei smiled and touched her heart, then pointed to the creatures disappearing into the jungle. Through gestures and a few English words she had learned, she explained that all living things were connected and that fear and anger were choices. She had shown the creatures that they came in peace, and the creatures had chosen to let them pass. This moment changed something. It's fundamental in Alex's understanding of the universe. He had always thought of intelligence as something that belonged only to advanced species like humans. But Lirelei was showing him that wisdom and communication could exist in forms he had never imagined. When they finally reached the caves, they found a hidden chamber deep underground where they could rest safely. The walls were covered with strange crystals that glowed with their own light, creating a beautiful and peaceful environment. As they set up their temporary home, Alex realized that despite all the danger and uncertainty, he had never been happier. He looked at Lirelei, whose skin patterns were now glowing with content blue and gold colors, and understood that they had both found something precious in this unlikely friendship. She had taught him about courage and wisdom, while he had shown her about kindness and sacrifice. Neither of them knew what challenges lay ahead, but they knew they would face them together. And somehow, that made anything seem possible. Alex and Lirelei had been hiding in the crystal caves for 2 days when everything changed. They thought they were safe in their underground sanctuary. But on the third morning, they heard voices echoing through the cave tunnels. At first, Alex grabbed his makeshift weapons, thinking it was the Earth's security forces who had finally tracked them down. But Lirelei's reaction was completely different. Her skin patterns suddenly blazed with excited gold and silver colors, and she made urgent, musical sounds that Alex had learned meant joy and recognition. She was trying to tell him that these weren't enemies. They were her people. The voices grew closer. Alex could hear that they definitely weren't speaking any Earth language. The sounds were musical and flowing, just like Lirelei's attempts at speech. Soon, figures appeared at the cave entrance, carrying glowing crystal devices that lit up the entire chamber. Alex got his first look at other members of Lirelei's species. They were tall and graceful, with the same silver-blue skin and bioluminescent patterns. But these people were wearing military-style uniforms and carrying advanced weapons. The leader was an older man whose skin patterns showed the deep blues and purples of authority and experience. When he saw Lirelei, his stern expression completely changed. He dropped his weapon and rushed forward, speaking rapidly in their musical language. Lirelei responded with sounds that Alex could tell were filled with emotion, relief, sadness, and something that sounded like anger. Through gestures and the few English words that Lirelei had taught the newcomer, Alex learned that this was Captain Thane, who had been Lirelei's military instructor when she was growing up. He had served her family for decades and had never believed the lies that Vexstar told about her running away like a coward. Captain Thane explained that after the coup, a group of loyal soldiers had formed a secret resistance movement. They had been searching for Lirelei for months, following clues and rumors across the galaxy. It had taken them this long to track her exile to Verdania, and then locate her in the vast jungle. The news they brought was both good and terrible. The good news was that many people still remembered Lirelei's kindness and believed in her vision for the future. The resistance movement was growing stronger every day, with citizens and soldiers joining them who were tired of Vexstar's harsh rule. The terrible news was much worse. Vexstar's paranoia and hunger for power had made him increasingly cruel. He'd started attacking neighboring star systems, making enemies of species that had been peaceful allies for generations. Even more seriously, his rejection of the old traditions had caused the crystal cores to begin failing. The crystal cores were the heart of their civilization, providing energy for everything from city lights to space travel. They only responded to leaders who truly understood the balance between power and responsibility. Vexstar's selfish and violent approach was slowly killing the very foundation of their society, Captain. Thane looked directly at Alex when he explained the most shocking part. The failing crystal cores weren't just an energy crisis, they were affecting the planet's ability to support life. If something didn't change soon, billions of people would die as their world became uninhabitable. Alex listened to all this through Lirelei's translation, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of the disaster. But what amazed him was how Lirelei had changed during their time together. The frightened, helpless princess he had found dying in the jungle was gone. In her place was someone who listened calmly to the crisis and immediately started planning solutions. She told Captain Thane about her time with Alex, how the human had taught her about sacrifice and real leadership. She explained that her understanding of power had completely changed. It wasn't about commanding others, but about serving them and bringing out the best in everyone around you. Alex realized that Lirelei wanted him to come with them when they returned to fight Vextor. The idea terrified him. He was just a scientist who had come to study plants, and now he was being asked to help save an alien civilization. But when he looked at Lirelei, he knew he couldn't abandon her now. The journey to the rebel base took several days aboard Captain Thane's advanced spacecraft. Alex got to see technology that was centuries ahead of anything on Earth. Vehicles that moved faster than light, cities built inside asteroids, and weapons that could reshape matter itself. But he also saw the signs of decay that Vextar's rule had brought to the Empire at the rebel base. Alex met other resistance members who had risked everything to oppose the false emperor. There were soldiers who had refused to follow cruel orders, scientists who had hidden research that Vextar wanted to use for weapons, and ordinary citizens who simply wanted their old life of peace and prosperity back. Lirelei's arrival transformed the entire movement. Word spread quickly that the true princess had returned, and people who had been afraid to join the resistance suddenly found their courage. But more importantly, Lirelei brought with her a new vision of leadership that inspired everyone around. She spent hours talking with the rebels, listening to their stories and learning about the problems that Vextar's rule had created. Alex watched her work and realized that she had become exactly the kind of leader that her people needed. Someone who combined royal authority with genuine compassion and hard-won wisdom. The final confrontation with Vextar came sooner than anyone expected. He had discovered the location of the rebel base and was preparing to attack with the full force of the Imperial fleet. But Lirelei had a plan that didn't involve fighting a war that would destroy countless lives. Instead of meeting Vextar's ships in battle, Lirelei decided to go directly to the crystal core on the homeworld. If she could reconnect with them and prove her legitimacy as a leader, Vextar's power would crumble without a single shot being fired. The mission was incredibly dangerous. They would have to sneak past Vextar's defenses and reach the crystal core chamber deep beneath the royal palace. Alex insisted on going with her, even though his human physiology made him vulnerable to the intense energy fields around the cores. The infiltration was like something from an adventure story, using Captain Thane's knowledge of the palace's secret passages and Alex's surprisingly useful military training. They managed to reach the core chamber undetected. But Vextar was waiting for them. The false emperor had grown paranoid and cruel during his time in power. His skin patterns were jagged and harsh, showing the mental strain of trying to force the crystal cores to obey him. When he saw Lirelei, his anger was so intense that the crystals around them started to crack and spark. But instead of fighting him with weapons or psychic powers, Lirelei did something that shocked everyone present. She approached Vextar calmly, began to speak about forgiveness and the possibility of healing their broken world together. At first, Vextar laughed at her words, but as she continued to speak, something changed in the chamber. The crystal cores, which had been dim and unresponsive for months, began to glow brighter. They were responding to Lirelei's genuine desire for peace and her willingness to put the good of her people above her own desire for revenge. Alex watched in amazement as the crystal's energy filled the room with warm, healing light. Feel the power flowing through everything around them, restoring balance and harmony to systems that had been damaged by months of conflict and hatred. When the light faded, Vextar was no longer the same person. The crystal energy had somehow healed the anger and fear that had driven him to betrayal. He looked at Lirelei with tears in his eyes and asked for her forgiveness. The transformation didn't end there. Word of Lirelei's return and the restoration of the crystal cores spread across the empire within hours. Vextar supporters abandoned him as they realized that the true leader had returned. The neighboring species that he had attacked welcomed news of his peaceful removal from power. In the days that followed, Lirelei was officially restored as the rightful ruler of the empire. But the galaxy she inherited was very different from the one she had been born to lead. Her time in the jungle with Alex had taught her that real strength came from understanding and cooperation, not domination. One of her first acts as Empress was to establish Alex as the first human ambassador. To her people, friendship had proven that different species could work together and learn from each other. She wanted that example to inspire others throughout the galaxy. Alex found himself in a position he'd never imagined, representing all of humanity to an advanced alien civilization. But he also knew that he was exactly where he belonged. His friendship with Lirelei had shown him that the universe was full of possibilities for understanding and cooperation. The story that had begun with betrayal and exile had become something beautiful, a tale of friendship that crossed the stars and proved that kindness and courage could overcome any obstacle. And though their adventures were just beginning, both Alex and Lirelei knew that together they could face whatever challenges the future might bring.